Very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Dinesh. I am going to present our research work titled on experimental validation of EFG model for SENB sedimentary rocks under varied salinity conditions. I am presenting this work on behalf of all the co-authors listed in this presentation. This is the outline of today's presentation. We all know that due to increase in CO2 level in the atmosphere causes global warming, melting of ices in the polar regions, and climate change. To store a large quantity of CO2 in subsurface, one possible technology is called geological and CO2 sequestration, where the injected CO2 goes to the depth of more than 800 meters, where the injected CO2 reacts with the rock minerals and formation water, which is brine, and it becomes the injected CO2 will be converted into in a solid state, or it become crystallized or mineralized over the through several trapping mechanisms, and this takes for the period of a few thousand years. It is very important to understand the integrity of this reservoir rock and cap rock, and for this purpose one needs to know the mechanical properties, and based on this work we wanted to develop a multi-scale model for simulating these mechanical properties under varied salinity conditions. These model results are also experimentally validated using uniaxial compressive strength, which gives the Young's modulus and Poisson ratio, as well as TPB fracture test, which gives the fracture toughness results. This is the case study problem which we have taken from Pagdaman et al. 2019, where he developed a 3D single-edged notched beam and subjected to TPP loading, where he developed a 3D model, and we can see the y-axis, which is nothing but y, is the dimensionless stress intensity factor, which is independent of material properties. So y is purely dependent on the geometrical properties. The same results we could able to match it for the 2D domain, where the SENB specimen is discretized using regular nodes, and towards the crack tip we made a nodal refinement around the crack tip, and as load increases the crack starts propagating after it reaches the critical load. These things we will see in our later slides, and the key parameter is to estimate the fracture toughness or stress intensity factor. When the stress intensity factor is called critical stress intensity factor, that term is nothing but fracture toughness, or the quantity is called fracture toughness. In this numerical technique, we have used M integral. Using this M integral, one can find out the fracture toughness. And the beauty of this EFG method is it uses the higher order shape functions because of the cubical spline weight functions, and due to which it can capture the discontinuities like fracture initiation and propagations using several diffraction techniques, or MTPS criterion like MTS criterion or MTPS criterions. These are the scopes in this EFG method. In this presentation, I am focusing only on the validation of this fracture toughness results for this for our experimental results. And for our experimental work, we have collected the samples of sandstone and siltstone from Australia, and then we have made the samples of these dimensions shown here using ISRM and ASTM standards, and then the samples are saturated using vacuum desiccators for 5 different conditions, except dry conditions. Remaining 4 conditions are vacuum saturated, and then the samples are the TPB samples are loaded at the strain rate of 0.02 mm per minute. Once the sample is tested, and we have also done some ACM and XRD analysis to understand the variation in the mechanical properties. This is the experimental samples, which is cored using the core drilling and core cutting machines. And before applying the load, we need to ensure that the top and bottom surfaces are smooth enough so that the load will transfer purely in vertical or in the gravity direction. And especially for the preparation of SENB samples, we have used water jet cutting to make the 8 mm depth notch. And this is the vacuum desiccators we have used. And here the samples are kept saturated, and kept the samples in this UCS and TPB test setup shown here. And then the maintained strain rates are applied to measure the load versus displacement variables. We can see when the load reaches the critical load, then the mode 1 SIF is called critical SIF or fracture toughness, and we can also measure the fracture energy. And these are the results from the Aramis camera using the surface field block and white dots, which is continuously monitored, and each pixel based on this pixel analysis we can quantify the strain rate. And we can clearly see from this slide, the dry sample takes the force of 1600 Newton, whereas the water saturated or brine saturated samples takes much lower load, almost half of it, like around less than 800 Newton. But within the brine saturated samples, there are variations in its load carrying capacity, and we understood that this is primarily due to the formation of NaCl crystal in the pore space. Also from the mineralogy based XRD results, it clearly shows compared to the dry sample results, the 30% NaCl saturated samples have 5.3% precipitation of halide mineral. So this clearly shows that there is a continuous dissolution and precipitation mechanism changing. Based on these experimental results, from the uniaxial compressive strength, we can get the Young's modulus, and also from the TPB test, based on the peak force, we can get the fracture toughness values, and we can see the change in the Young's modulus and the fracture toughness value. These macroscopic material properties are highly dependent on the micro scale level mechanisms, which is precipitation and dissolution mechanisms. This causes the changes in the macroscopic material properties, and based on this we have developed a multi-scale model, and based on this research findings, we finally conclude that the mechanical properties like Young's modulus, Poisson's ratio, fracture toughness are studied for the gauge force sandstone. From our elementary Galerkin model, we have also validated this stress intensity factor, means critical SIF value with the that is compared with both experimental and numerical value, and both are in good agreement. If you are further interested in this work, you can refer this paper, and also the other mechanical properties for the representative cap rock, which we have taken siltstone. These results, these findings also we have published in the one of the conference work, and you are most welcome to refer this work, and you can, if you have any doubts, you can contact us through email. And thank you very much.